The ship's alarms blared as Han Su wrestled with the controls. Red warning lights flashed across his cockpit display as another asteroid clipped his vessel's wing. His Space Templar armor automatically tightened around him, preparing for the worst. The navigation system was dead, life support was failing, and the engines were giving their last whimpers of power. Through the viewport, the asteroid field stretched endlessly. Han Su had been running a routine patrol when his sensors picked up an unusual energy signature. Following it had led him here, far from any charted space lanes. Now he was paying the price for his curiosity. "Computer, give me anything you've got," he muttered, but only static answered. His armor's internal systems were still functioning, displaying vital readings across his helmet's heads-up display. At least he wouldn't die immediately if the ship lost pressure. Another impact rocked the vessel. This time, the hull breach alarms screamed to life. Han Su saw pieces of his ship's outer plating tumble past the viewport, glinting in the light of a distant sun. Below, a planet emerged from behind the asteroid field, a swirling mass of purples and blues. With no other choice, Han Su aimed his dying ship toward the atmosphere. The entry was rough. His armor's shock absorbers worked overtime as the ship shuddered and broke apart around him. The last thing he saw before impact was a vast purple forest rushing up to meet him. Han Su awoke to the crack of sparking electronics. His armor had saved his life, but damage readings covered his visor's display. He pushed himself up from the wreckage, noting the scattered pieces of his ship across a clearing of strange, violet grass. The air was breathable according to his sensors, but he kept his helmet sealed just in case. The forest around him was unlike anything he'd seen in his years of space travel. Trees towered hundreds of meters into the sky, their trunks wider than buildings. Their leaves shimmered with an inner light, casting the ground in perpetual twilight. The air was thick with what looked like bioluminescent spores, dancing in patterns that seemed almost purposeful. Han Su checked his emergency beacon. The impact had damaged it, but he might be able to repair it with salvage from the wreck. He began gathering useful components, trying to ignore the growing ache in his ribs where his armor had absorbed the worst of the crash. That's when he first noticed the silence. The strange forest had gone completely still. Even the glowing spores seemed to freeze in midair. Han Su's hand moved to his weapon, drawing it slowly as his training kicked in. Something was watching him. Movement caught his eye. A massive shape shifting through the violet mist. Then another and another. They moved with impossible grace for their size, weaving between the giant trees like shadows. His armor systems tried to track them but kept losing lock, as if they weren't quite solid. Finally, one of the shapes emerged into the clearing. Han Su's breath caught in his throat. It was beautiful and terrifying. A creature that seemed to combine the majesty of ancient earth dragons with advanced biotechnology. Its scales weren't just black. They shifted colors like oil on water, covered in patterns that might have been natural or might have been circuit-like designs. More of them appeared, moving with careful precision. Han Su counted at least 6 surrounding him. Their eyes glowed with intelligence, studying him just as he studied them. He knew he should be terrified, but something about them felt more curious than hostile. One of them, larger than the others, with scales that seemed to absorb light, lowered its head to look directly at Han Su. Its eyes were like galaxies, swirling with colors he couldn't name. Han Su slowly lowered his weapon, recognizing a moment of first contact when he saw one. The dragon-like being made a sound, not quite a roar, not quite a song, that seemed to vibrate through Han Su's very bones. His armor systems tried to analyze it but failed, displaying only error messages. Whatever these creatures were, they were far beyond anything the Space Templars had encountered before. As the sun began to set, casting the forest in deep purple shadows, Han Su realized his mission had just changed dramatically. He wasn't just a crashed pilot anymore. He was humanity's first ambassador to whatever magnificent species he had just discovered, if he survived long enough to tell anyone about it. The night brought new dangers to Hansu's crash site. His attempt to repair the distress beacon had led him away from the relative safety of his ship's wreckage into the depths of the violet forest. The dragon-like beings had vanished as quickly as they had appeared, leaving him alone with his damaged armor and dwindling supplies. The attack came without warning. Something fast and low to the ground burst from the underbrush. A creature that looked like a cross between a wolf and a praying mantis. Its crystalline claws tore through the weakened sections of Hansu's armor before he could react. He managed to fire 2 shots from his weapon, but the beast was already gone, leaving him bleeding from deep gashes in his side. More of them emerged from the shadows. Hansu counted 4 sets of gleaming compound eyes tracking his movements. His armor's medical systems remained offline, unable to stop the bleeding or administer pain medication. Each breath sent sharp pains through his chest. Hansu backed away slowly, keeping his weapon raised. The creatures moved with practiced coordination, spreading out to surround him. They communicated through clicks and whistles, planning their next attack. His motion tracker showed more signatures approaching from behind. When they struck again, it was from 3 directions at once. Hansu managed to blast one of them, its crystalline body shattering like glass, but the others got past his defenses. Their claws found the gaps in his armor, tearing through the undersuit. He fought back with everything he had, but his movements were getting slower, weaker. Spotting a rocky outcropping ahead, Hansu made his choice. He threw his last shock grenade behind him and ran. The explosion bought him precious seconds, but each step sent waves of agony through his body. Blood dripped from his armor, leaving a trail he knew they would follow. His legs gave out just as he reached the rocks. Hansu dragged himself up the rough surface, leaving bloody handprints on the stone. The predators were already regrouping, their clicking growing louder as they approached for the kill. His weapon was nearly empty, and he could barely hold it steady. That's when the air changed. The predators sensed it too, their clicking turning to alarmed shrieks. Massive shadows passed overhead, blocking out the strange twilight of the alien forest. Hansu looked up to see the dragon-like beings descending around him, their wings creating gusts that bent the trees. The predators retreated, but not fast enough. One of the dragons swept down and caught 2 of them in massive claws, crushing their crystalline bodies effortlessly. The others scattered into the underbrush, their hunting calls replaced by sounds of terror. Hansu slumped against the rock, his vision growing dim around the edges. The dragons landed in a circle around him, their scales shifting with colors he couldn't name. Up close, he could see patterns in their hide that looked almost like writing, glowing with inner light. The largest one approached, moving with impossible grace for its size, its eyes fixed on Hansu's wounds, studying them with an intelligence that seemed ancient and vast. It made that strange psalm-like sound again, and this time Hansu felt it resonate with something deep in his bones. He wanted to speak, to try communicating, but blood loss was taking its toll. The last thing Hansu saw before consciousness slipped away was the dragon carefully reaching for him with claws that could have crushed him instantly, yet moved with surprising gentleness. As darkness took him, Hansu realized these weren't just animals or simple aliens. The way they moved, the intelligence in their eyes, the patterns on their scales, they were something far more advanced than he had imagined. If he survived, he would have quite a story to tell the Space Templars. If he survived. The violet forest grew quiet once more, broken only by the sound of massive wings as the dragons carried their unconscious human guest away into the deepening alien night. Hansu regained consciousness in a chamber made entirely of living crystal. The walls pulsed with soft light, creating patterns that seemed to respond to his thoughts. His armor had been carefully removed, leaving him in his damaged undersuit. The wounds from the predator attack were covered in a strange, shimmering substance that numbed the pain. A figure entered the chamber, smaller than the dragons he'd seen before, but still impressive. Her scales were predominantly white with iridescent patterns that reminded him of medical symbols. She moved with a healer's precise grace, checking the substance on his wounds. "I am Ji Wu," she said, her words coming through his partially functioning translator in a melodic but broken way. "You are safe in the heart spire of our citadel." Han Su tried to sit up, but his body protested sharply. Through the crystal walls, he could see the vast city stretching out below, a forest of crystalline towers that merged seamlessly with the actual forest. Dragons of various sizes flew between the structures in complex patterns that looked like aerial dancing. "Your injuries are severe," Ji Wu continued, her galaxy-like eyes studying him. "But you show remarkable resilience for a fragile form." "Thank you for saving me," Han Su managed to say, hoping his translator would convey his gratitude properly. "I am Han Su, a space Templar from Earth." Ji Wu's scales rippled with what might have been interest. "We have not encountered your kind before. Your biology is different, but do not fear. We know how to help wounded warriors find peace." Something in her tone made Han Su uneasy. "What kind of help?" "In our society, warriors who can no longer fight are given the mercy of a peaceful passing," Ji Wu explained, as if discussing something completely normal. "It is our highest form of respect. No suffering, no lingering decline, just peaceful transition to the next realm." Han Su's blood ran cold as he understood. They weren't planning to heal him. They were planning to euthanize him. In their culture, his wounds marked him as someone to be mercifully eliminated rather than treated. "There's been a misunderstanding," he said carefully, trying to keep his voice steady. "Humans can heal from injuries like this. We don't need to be helped to peace." Ji Wu's scales flickered with what might have been doubt. "All warriors say this. The desire to continue fighting is strong, but acceptance brings true honor. The ceremony will be beautiful." Before Han Su could protest further, more dragons entered the chamber. They carried what looked like ceremonial items, crystals of various colors and sizes, arranged in patterns he didn't understand but somehow knew were meant for his peaceful transition. "Please," he tried again, "contact the Space Templars. They can explain our biology. We're different from what you're used to." "Rest now," Ji Wu said soothingly, touching a crystal that made the air thick with sweet-smelling particles. "The ceremony will begin when the third moon rises. You will be remembered as a warrior who fought bravely." As the sedative in the air began to take effect, Han Su fought to stay conscious. He had to find a way to convince them that human resilience was different from what they knew. His translator crackled with static as he tried one last time to explain, but darkness was already creeping in at the edges of his vision. The last thing he saw was Ji Wu arranging the ceremonial crystals, her movements filled with what she clearly thought was compassion. He had until moonrise to either escape or convince them that their mercy, however well-intentioned, would be murder by human standards. Neither option seemed particularly promising as consciousness slipped away once more. Han Su fought against the sedative's effects, forcing himself to move despite his body's protests. The ceremonial chamber's crystal walls seemed to pulse with his determination, reflecting his struggle. He managed to stand, using the wall for support, when a new dragon entered, smaller than the others, with scales that shimmered with deep blue and gold patterns. "You should not be moving," the young dragon said through the translator. "I am Ta Min, a scholar of other species. Your resistance to the sleep mist is unexpected." "Because I'm not ready to die," Han Su said, his legs shaking with effort. "Humans don't give up easily." Tai Min moved closer, his head tilting in curiosity. The scholar's eyes focused on Han Su's wounds, where the shimmering substance Ji Wu had applied was beginning to change color. "The healing gel, it's reacting differently to your tissue." Han Su looked down and saw what the dragon meant. The gel was taking on a pinkish hue as his body naturally began to heal beneath it. "This is normal for us. Humans heal. We adapt. We survive." Ta Min's scales rippled with excitement. He produced a small crystal device that projected images in the air. "May I scan you?" Our records show no species with such rapid cellular regeneration. Despite his situation, Han Su found himself amused by the scholar's obvious scientific curiosity. He nodded, and Taemin began taking readings, making sounds that the translator interpreted as expressions of amazement. Fascinating. Your body is actively repairing itself. And look, your vital signs are growing stronger, not weaker. This contradicts everything we know about severe trauma in sentient species. Han Su took a few experimental steps, pushing through the pain. We evolved on a harsh world. Had to be tough to survive. Now, about this ceremony. Taemin's excitement faded to concern. The mercy ceremony is our highest tradition. To stop it would be unprecedented. He paused, scales shifting thoughtfully. But so is your very existence. A commotion outside the chamber drew their attention. Jiwoo had returned with her assistants, carrying more ceremonial items. She stopped short at seeing Han Su standing. "How is this possible?" she asked, her translator making her voice sound both confused and concerned. "The sleep mist should have." "Because he's not dying," Taemin interrupted, displaying his scanning results. "Look at these readings. His species has regenerative capabilities beyond anything in our records. What we thought was terminal trauma is actually a recoverable injury for his kind." Jiwoo studied the readings, her scales changing color in what Han Su was learning to recognize as surprise. "But the ceremony is already prepared. The elders are gathering." "Then they should gather to witness something new," Taemin said boldly. "Not an ending, but a beginning. A chance to learn about a species that defies our understanding of life's limitations." Han Su straightened up, ignoring the pain, wanting to demonstrate his point. "Where I come from, we have a saying, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Every challenge we survive teaches us something new." The concept seemed to resonate with both dragons. Their scales rippled with colors Han Su hadn't seen before, and they exchanged looks that seemed meaningful even across species. "Perhaps," Jiwoo said slowly, "we have something to learn from your kind's resilience. But the elders will need convincing." "Then let me show them," Han Su replied, taking another steady step forward. "Let me prove that mercy sometimes means giving someone the chance to recover, not just an easy end." Taemin's eyes glowed with what might have been hope. This could change everything we thought we knew about healing, about life itself. He turned to Jiwoo. "We must at least try." The grand chamber of the elders was a massive crystal dome that caught and amplified every sound. Han Su stood before the Dragon Council, his wounds still healing but his stance defiant. Above him, 7 ancient dragons perched on crystalline ledges, their scales bearing complex patterns that seemed to tell the history of their species. Sungho, the lead elder, loomed largest among them. His scales were deep midnight blue with silvery patterns that looked like constellations. When he spoke, the translator struggled to capture the authority in his voice. "For 10,000 cycles, we have shown mercy to the wounded. It is our most sacred tradition. You ask us to abandon this." Taemin moved forward, placing himself between Han Su and the council. His smaller size made the gesture even more dramatic. "I ask us to understand that mercy can take different forms. Look at his recovery rate. His wounds are healing as we speak." The elders murmured among themselves, their scales shifting colors in agitation. One of them gestured at Han Su's medical readings, which floated in the air as shimmering holograms. "This could be the death strength some species show before the end," another elder suggested, "the final surge before collapse." "No," Taemin insisted. "I've been monitoring him continuously. Every reading shows improvement. His species has regenerative abilities we've never seen before. Ending his life would not be mercy. It would be destroying something remarkable." Sungho's wings spread wide, casting shadows across the chamber. "You overstep, young scholar. This is not about science. This is about honor, about tradition." "Then let me speak of honor," Han Su said, his voice clear despite his pain. "Where I come from, the highest honor is not in how we die, but in how we live, how we face challenges, how we overcome them." The chamber grew quiet. Even the crystal walls seemed to hold their breath. Sung Ho descended from his perch, landing before Han Su with earth-shaking force. Up close, his size was overwhelming. "You speak well for a wounded one," the elder said. "But words do not change what must be done." "No," Tan Min responded, his wings spreading in a clear challenge. "But truth does. And the truth is, we are wrong about this. Our traditions are meant to serve life, not end it needlessly." Gasps echoed through the chamber. No young dragon had ever challenged an elder so directly. Sung Ho's scales darkened with what might have been anger or surprise. "You would risk everything, your position, your future, for this alien?" Sung Ho demanded. "I would risk everything for the truth," Tai Min replied. "Look at him. Really look. His strength grows while we debate his death. If our ways cannot accommodate new understanding, then perhaps our ways need to change." Han Su stood straighter, letting them all see how he maintained his balance, despite injuries that should have left him helpless. "Let me prove myself. Give me the chance to show you that different doesn't mean wrong." A low humming filled the chamber as the elders communicated in frequencies too deep for the translator to catch. Sung Ho's scales shifted through various patterns before settling on a deep, thoughtful blue. "In all our history," the elder finally said, "no one has challenged the mercy ceremony. But then, in all our history, we have never met a species like yours." He turned to the other elders. "Perhaps it is we who must show wisdom now, not just tradition." Tai Min's wings relaxed slightly, but he didn't move from his protective position. "Then you will give him a chance." "We will watch," Sung Ho declared. "We will learn. And if you are wrong, young scholar, both you and the human will face the consequences." The crystal dome above seemed to brighten, as if the very architecture approved of this break from tradition. Han Su realized he wasn't just fighting for his own life anymore. He was becoming a test case for change in an ancient society. The pressure should have been overwhelming, but somehow it only made him more determined to prove Tan Min's faith in him was justified. The combat arena was a vast crystal bowl carved into the heart of the citadel. Han Su stood at one end, his armor partially repaired but still showing battle damage. Across from him, Yang Ha, the dragon warrior, stretched his crimson-scaled wings. The warrior's movements were fluid and precise, making Han Su's still healing body feel clumsy in comparison. "This is not a fight to the death," Ta Min had explained earlier. "It is a test of spirit. Show them your will to live exceeds your wounds." Now, facing an opponent 5 times his size, Han Su wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. His ribs still ached from the predator attack, and his legs weren't fully steady. But he couldn't back down. His life, and humanity's reputation among these beings depended on this moment. Yang Ha moved first, faster than something so large should be able to move. Han Su barely activated his armor's jump servos in time, leaping aside as the dragon's tail swept through where he'd been standing. The movement sent fresh pain through his injuries, but he forced himself to stay focused. "You move well for a dying one," Yang Ha commented, his translator making the words sound like both praise and challenge. "Not dying," Han Su replied, activating his armor's combat systems. "Just getting started." The dragon warrior launched another attack, this time from above. Han Su rolled and fired his grappling line, using the dragon's own momentum to swing himself clear. The assembled crowd of dragons murmured in surprise. Clearly, they hadn't expected such agility from a wounded alien. But Han Su knew he couldn't keep dodging forever. His wounds were beginning to throb, and his breathing was becoming labored. He needed to show them something more than just survival. Yang Ha landed and circled, his scales shifting colors in complex patterns. "You have heart, small one, but heart alone will not save you." "No," Han Su agreed, settling into a fighting stance. but this might. He charged forward, surprising everyone, including Yonghe. The dragon warrior reared back, expecting an attack from below. Instead, Hansu fired both grappling lines, using them to launch himself up and over Yonghe's head. As he passed over, he deployed his armor's energy blade, scoring a light touch across the dragon's scales. Landing hurt more than he wanted to admit, but Hansu managed to stay on his feet. A thin line of luminescent fluid marked where he tagged Yonghe. Not a serious wound, but an undeniable hit. The arena went silent. No one had expected the wounded human to land a strike on their champion. Yonghe touched the mark with one claw, then turned to face Hansu with new respect in his galaxy-like eyes. "You choose attack when most would defend," the dragon warrior observed. Impressive. Hansu's legs were shaking now, but he refused to show weakness. Humans don't just survive. We fight back. We adapt. We overcome. Yonghe spread his wings to their full span, casting a shadow over the entire arena. "Then show me more, warrior of Earth. Show me why you deserve to live." What followed was a dance of desperation and determination. Hansu couldn't match the dragon's power or speed, but he used every trick his damaged armor and injured body could manage. Each time Yonghe thought he had the human cornered, Hansu would find some impossible way to turn the situation to his advantage. Finally, after what felt like hours, Hansu's legs gave out. He fell to one knee, his armor sparking from overuse. He looked up, expecting to see Yonghe moving in for the final strike. Instead, the dragon warrior had landed and folded his wings. "Enough," Yonghe declared. "I have seen what I needed to see." The dragon turned to face the elder's observation platform. "This one does not need our mercy. He has earned his life through combat and courage." Hansu struggled to stand, but his body had finally reached its limit. Before he could fall, he felt Tanmin's supportive presence beside him. "Well fought," the young scholar whispered. "You've shown them something they've never seen before, a warrior who grows stronger through battle instead of fading away." Above them, the gathered dragons began a haunting song that the translator couldn't interpret, but that somehow conveyed approval and respect. Hansu had done more than just save his own life. He had helped an ancient species rediscover that there was more than one kind of honor, more than one way to show mercy. The healing chamber felt different now. Hansu watched through its crystal walls as dragons of all sizes flew past, their scales catching the light of 3 setting moons. His wounds were almost fully healed, thanks to a combination of human resilience and the dragon's advanced medical knowledge. Sungho entered the chamber, his ancient form somehow less intimidating than before. The elder dragon carried something that looked like a crystal flower, its petals shifting with the same patterns that marked their scales. "You have taught us much, warrior of Earth," Sungho said, placing the crystal flower beside Hansu's bed. "For millennia, we thought mercy meant ending suffering. You showed us that sometimes mercy means having faith in life's ability to persist." Hansu sat up, noting how the movement no longer caused pain. "Your people taught me something too. Sometimes the oldest traditions need to be questioned, not out of disrespect, but out of hope for something better." Tanmin entered next, carrying Hansu's fully repaired armor. The young scholar's scales glowed with pride. "The Council has appointed me as official liaison to Earth. They want to establish diplomatic relations with your Space Templars." "More than that," Sungho added. "We wish to learn from each other. Your species' remarkable healing abilities, combined with our medical technology, could help countless worlds." Hansu stood and began putting on his armor, each piece clicking into place with familiar comfort. "And your understanding of mercy and honor could teach us humans a lot too. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with weapons, but with ideas." Through the crystal walls, they could see a group of young dragons practicing new fighting moves, ones they'd adapted after watching Hansu's battle with Yonghe. The warrior himself was among them, teaching them how to think differently about combat and survival. "Your distress beacon has been repaired," Taimin said. But the council hopes you might stay a while longer. There is much more we could learn from each other. Hansu smiled. I'll need to report back to Earth eventually. But yes, I'd like to stay. Someone needs to help explain humans to you. And I seem to have become something of an expert. Sung Ho's scales rippled with what Hansu now recognized as amusement. Indeed. And perhaps you can help us understand why your kind is so stubborn about staying alive. That's simple, Hansu replied. Every moment of life is precious. Every challenge and opportunity to grow stronger. That's why we fight so hard to keep going. Outside, the first sun was rising, casting the crystal city in shades of gold and violet. Dragons soared between the towers in complex patterns, their scales reflecting the light like countless flying jewels. On one of the landing platforms, Ji-Woo was teaching other healers new techniques for treating injuries, combining their traditional methods with what they'd learned from Hansu's recovery. A new age begins, Sung Ho declared, one where mercy takes many forms, and strength is measured not just in power, but in the will to endure. Hansu stepped to the window, his restored armor gleaming in the alien sunlight. Below him, the city was already changing, adapting, growing, just as he had. He thought about all the possibilities this alliance could bring, all the ways both species could learn and benefit from each other. To endurance, he said, raising his hand in a gesture of respect. To endurance, the dragons responded, their voices harmonizing in a way that made the crystal walls sing. And so began a new chapter in the history of both species, built not on the necessity of mercy, but on the shared understanding that life's greatest strength lies in its endless capacity for change and growth. As Hansu watched the dragons soar overhead, he knew that his near-death experience had led to something far greater than survival. It had led to understanding.